There we go. This is a picture I took standing outside the door of my job. And you'll notice the sun only shines on the bottom of the clouds. This is a real important point. So when you talk about Earth's twilight, you look at, the world's twilight, you look at a day, a twilight within a 12-hour period. And I read this already to you, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. This is so important to me because I think there was a hidden message where he said, consider the sky's red. The sky's red. He said it a couple times. And when you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's repeated in different ways, but the point gets across. Look at the sky when it's red, and it's a sign. He said to give him the sign of Jonah, so that's pretty cool picture, where he's going down. I always wondered if Jonah died in the belly of the whale and got resurrected, but I read this morning in the Bible that no, he didn't, because he was in there praying and he had weeds on his head. But Christ did die and was resurrected. And this is what I was saying a few minutes ago about parables being allegories or parallels. It's the same thing. So, God used this many, many times when he was preaching to people. So it's a good thing to look at parallels, especially parallels in nature. And the first talk I gave was, it was about the parallel between the latter rain on Earth, and we just went through the latter rain just a few weeks ago, just recently. It's on the summer solstice, is June 21, and then it's cold and rainy on the solstices, and it's dry and hot on the equinox, and that's how God set up so we could have wheat. But anyway, that's a parallel between the Earth's early and latter rain and the world's early and latter rain. That was January 6th. So, anyways. Keep looking, don't quit looking, keep hoping and studying God's word, because there's a lot of his messages, and we are at the end of this 6,000-year saga. This is the one I was reading before. In the last days, saith God, I will show wonders in the heavens above. Show is a synonym to reveal. The presentation is about a sign in the heavens, and it's a parallel, I think, to the last days. So we'll get into this. This is a little eighth grade science here. But what's a twilight sequence all about? When the sun shines on the earth all the time, the earth spins its axis within that light. And but on the edges of morning and evening, there's this thing called twilight, and there's three phases to it. There's the astronomical, the nautical, and the civil. I get this from Wikipedia. And during the civil twilight phase of the Earth, when it rotates, there's a red flash. I call it the red flare. There's just a few minutes of a red flare. And I'll explain why that red flare happens. This is what Jesus was pointing them to, the red flare. This is another example of just looking at the earth and how that on the shadow side of the earth, there's these three phases of twilight that actually are always there, we just spin around within it. And like I said, there's the civil dusk, which is where the red flash happens. Then there's nautical and astronomical. A little bit better way of looking at that is that the red flare happens toward the latter part of the civil phase of it, a few minutes into it. This whole sequence is about 15 minutes to 20, depends on your latitude. But this red flare was a few minutes. And that also depends on the latitude. You can see as the sunlight is shining on the earth and the earth spinning around, and it creates the dawn and the twilight. And it's a very small percentage of a day. And at the equinox, that percentage, depending on where you're standing, is like 2 to 3 minutes. So here it's up to 5 minutes. But in Jerusalem, which I'll explain why I picked Jerusalem, it's 2.76 minutes at the equinox. And when the red flare happens, this beam of light comes up from behind the horizon, and it shines on the bottom of the clouds, just the bottom of the clouds. Well, the sky is blue behind it, and when there's no light on, the clouds are black. but this red flash happens, and like many times I've seen this red flash, and I'm running out. You got to hurry up and come out and see the red flash, in the beautiful sky just for a few minutes, and me and the wife just sat there and look at it, and it passes over us, and it's gone. But it's beautiful, and it happens every night and every morning. And I think that this briefness of this red flash is significant. But it also is like, red's a color like on stop signs. It's a warning. It's like danger, something's coming, red. It gets your attention. And God brought our attention to the red flare of the sky. If you think about the cloud's color, during the day, all 12 hours of the day, they're just white, sun shining on there, they're white. And then right at the end of the first phase of the twilight, there's this red flare, just minutes, and it passes by. And then the sky is still lit up behind the clouds. You watch this tonight when you go out there. The blue sky behind the cloud makes the cloud look black. There's no light in the cloud, but there's light behind it, so the cloud looks black. And then as the blue sky fades away during the latter part of the twilight sequence, the clouds kind of like disappear. They go pale. So you got this white, red, black, pale. And it's that sequence that's interesting to me in the colors, because that's the colors of the four horsemen. White, red, black, pale. It's just kind of an interesting point. But again, this is from Wikipedia. It's showing that during the civil phase, that angle of the red light, it's an instant angle. It's the light gets bent by the atmosphere. It's like a prism effect, and it bends it. And I'll show you this bending of the light is really important because of where it focuses on. So you get the civil phase, and it's the red light bent about 4 degrees. So it bends it a little bit. So it goes around the ball and bends like that, but 4 degrees. And so if it didn't bend it, you'd have this perfectly, a shadow behind the earth that's the exact diameter of the earth, if it didn't bend it. But it does bend it. And it bends it at that 4 degrees through that prism effect of our atmosphere. And so kind of think of like a ice cream cone, and you're shining light on it. The light bends around at 4 degrees and comes to a focal point. And this is not an accident. So this is a satellite picture of, I'll come back to that in a minute, but this is a satellite picture of the Earth at twilight, and you can see the faint red band there. It's pretty cool. It's a real thing. It's not just something that happens once in a while. It depends on whether there's a lot of clouds or not. You might see it or not see it, but it always happens. And it's a real phenomenon. I was flying in a plane one time at 30,000 feet, and I looked out the window and I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And I took a series of pictures of it because it was so phenomenal. But this is a picture from 30,000 feet from an airplane where the red band is shooting out into the blue sky. And when red and blue combine, it makes purple. And so this is a physical picture of the red band shooting out as the plane went by. Here's another one I took where I was flying, and we were flying along. We actually flew through the red band, and it was a brilliant blue day, blue sky, and then it started turning yellow, and then it went completely red, and then went back to blue. It was pretty cool. So my point is, this is a real phenomenon, and the red band effect on the clouds is, as it goes through about 120 miles of atmosphere. And you assume the clouds are at 10,000 feet, and then it makes a yellow light. So you get this golden effect when the sun hasn't quite gone behind the horizon. But when it goes behind the horizon, this light goes through another 120 miles of air, and it filters out everything but the red light. So if you're standing there and you look up, you see red on the bottom of the clouds. And it's pretty cool. And it lasts just for a few minutes. It's very brief. But it's a warning. I've heard people say that they thought God did this because a long time ago, before people had clocks, they had at the end, all of a sudden, and they're getting close to the end of the day, and they're working out wherever, and they got to go gather firewood. And they got to get ready for night. Night's coming. So this red flare goes, it's time to put down the tools and go gather some firewood and get ready for the evening, get ready for the evening meal. It's a nice way that God told the workmen it's time for the day to end. And there's still enough light they can gather wood, and there's still enough light they can do a few things before it goes to dark. But once again, it only lights up the bottom of the clouds, which is significant because a cloud sitting in the sky will go from white to red to black to pale, and it doesn't hardly move, just sitting there. I mean, those are the phases of twilight. And I don't know if you can see it very well. This is out my front window at my house, and it's a time-lapse video of a twilight sequence from my front door, my front window. But you can see it goes yellow, and then there's that brilliant red, and then it goes away. That's important, that it's brief, and then it goes away. Pretty cool. So, why is this? Why are we talking about this? It's because when the red light bends around the Earth at 4 degrees, it focuses on the moon. So when there's an Earth-moon eclipse, it turns the moon red. And it doesn't happen very often. There's a schedule for it. You can look it up on Wikipedia, that every 5 years or 4 years, something like that, we have an Earth-moon eclipse and the moon turns to blood. And why is this kind of an important thing from a religious perspective? It's because there's a number of places in the Bible that talk in the end times that the world, the sun will be darkened and the moon will turn to blood. And it could be this has been the way it, this gives us another clue that something's probably going to happen in the next 5 years. I don't know. But we're on this schedule, and that's why the moon turns blood red, is because it's in an eclipse with the Earth, and the Earth filters out. So, but once in a while, the Earth has a bunch of clouds around it when this happens, very rarely. And when there's a heavy cloud cover all the way around the circumference of the Earth, when this eclipse happens, it blocks all the red light out, and only the blue light comes past it and focuses on the moon. And that's a blue moon. It happens once in a blue moon, yeah. But it's very rare, but it does happen. But it requires a big ring of clouds around the circumference of the Earth when it happens. So God's put these marvelous things in nature for us to study and think about, drawing our attention to the moon's color and the clouds. And there's a message in all this, I believe. I believe it's a sign of the last days on earth. In Acts 2:20, the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and notable day of the Lord. So we're coming up on one of these events in 2031, so we'll see. And Joel says the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Revelation said, and I beheld, and they opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, and the moon became blood. And I want to explain something about physics a little bit. We had a very large geological event. Let's just say we had a super volcano go off in Yellowstone or something like that. It would create this big cloud all the way around the world, and it would darken the sun. And when it darkened the sun, it would turn the moon to red, maybe even blue, But God's put these in the Bible for some reason. These are signs of the end and things that are going to happen. And so I like to study them and think about it. And in doing so, it draws your attention to God and the marvelous works that He's done and will do for us. Once again, the colors of the sky were basically the colors of the bottom of the cloud: white, red, black, pale. And the red one is interesting because these kind of represent transitions, I think, possibly in the world's history. So how long is the red phase? It depends on the latitude. So at Jerusalem, the time for the civil red flare is 2.76 minutes. In Spokane, it's 3.49. In the equator, it's 2.25. Jerusalem, at a higher altitude, 25,000 feet, it's 4.4. Spokane, 5.5. So it depends on the height of the cloud, but the average cloud is what I did it for, which is 10,000 feet. And if you look it up, this is the average cloud height in Jerusalem. why this is sort of important is because at the latitude of Jerusalem, 33.77 degrees, the speed of the Earth's rotation is 881 miles per hour. And this picture here is a picture of twilight in Jerusalem. And if you take the cloud height at 10,000 feet and the speed of the rotation of the Earth and stuff, the time for the red phase calculates out to 2.76 minutes. And if you look at the picture down in the bottom corner there, that's a very, very, very small percentage of the total day. And at the equinox, 12 hours is 720 minutes. And Jesus answered and said unto the 12, there's a day is 12 hours. But why is this? And so I have a hypothesis why God pointed us to the clouds. And I think it's because, and this is a hypothesis, assuming the world's 6,000 years old when Christ returns, which I think many Christians believe it's about to happen, so then that would concur with the 6,000-year thing. And a day is 12 hours, which is 720 minutes, and you assume the red flare at the twilight represents the start of the last days, beginning of this. It's in the Bible, it's called the beginning of sorrows, that time phase, Matthew. The parallel in nature points to the red flare ends approximately 23 years after the world's 6,000 years old. This is simple ratio. You know, this is just, it might be a coincidence, and it could be a coincidence, but it's a parallel that is there. This is a real parallel that exists in nature. You can't deny that. It's just whether it's a parallel to the end of the world or not is debatable, but the parallel exists. So you say, well, when was the world 6,000 years old? According to Ussher, James Ussher, he was an archbishop in Ireland. He was a major contributor to the King James Bible. Matter of fact, he's referenced in it. And he did quite a study on it and decided, and it's listed in the margin of the King James, that the world was about 4,000 years old, or right on 4,000 when Christ came. So our calendar, if you take the best evidence we have, which is our calendar, I mean, it makes sense that God wouldn't do something, put a sign, embed a sign in nature like this, if the calendar that we had to use was something we didn't know about, or some weird calendar. But just assume it's the calendar we have. Today is 2024. So you take 6,000, subtract 4,000 plus 1, because that's how you go from BC to AD, and that puts the world at 6,000 years in 2001. But you say, 2001, if that was a turning point, there's the twilight parallel in nature points to this year. Life has gone on normally for thousands of years without the last day events happening, but at some point the trend will end. Jesus points us to the red sky. It has always been there and always for all to see in all times, in all nations, in all languages. The secret in the clouds. So if 6,000 years equals 12 hours, 2.76 minutes at Jerusalem equals 23, it points to our present time. And life has gone on for thousands of years without the last day events happening. But at some point, this is going to change. Obviously, it's going to change. There's no way. Every Christian that believes in the Bible and God knows that this can't keep going on forever and ever. It also says in the Bible that God does nothing without revealing it to his prophets first. And Jesus, the greatest prophet, gave us a clue, and I'm looking at this and I found this parallel, and I don't know if it's really saying a whole lot more than we're close to the end of the world right now. But if the parallel is true, a significant event in prophecy most likely would have to happen 23 years ago. If this parallel is right and there was a transition and something was about to happen, there was something that should have happened 23 years ago that was very significant when it started. So 20 years ago, something big did happen. It was a change in America's whole system of privacy and the way our government functions. The freedom started to become eroded away. Politics becomes corrupted. It's quite a mess. And so I think something did happen, and it should have happened. And I think that 2000, in our time frame, this 2024, I'm an engineer, so you always have error bands associated with every calculation you do. And it has to do with the accuracy of the inputs. And I would say the error band on this is plus or minus 5%. So, maybe 10 years from now, maybe it could have been 10 years ago. I mean, the error band, but that said, I believe we're in the last days, I don't, there's nobody knows exact time, but we are told to look at the signs and be aware of how, that Christ is coming. And I believe in Walter Veith did a really good presentation where he looked at all of Ellen White's writings. It's a key reason why he became a Seventh-day Adventist. And he said that he studied every single place in her writings where she mentioned that the world would be 6,000 years or just before 6,000 years when Christ come back. And there's quite a few references. You can go look at his thing. It's a very famous YouTube that he did. Very good. And he believes, that there's no doubt we're close to the end of the world, How close? I don't know. It's safe to think that, don't delay preparing your character. I mean, we don't know when Christ's going to come. We don't even know what to do to prepare, but we do know this one thing. We got to prepare our character. We have to get rid of the things of this world. We have to focus on the gospel, preaching the gospel, because he says in there, repent and be baptized, but then go preach the gospel. We have to spread it. And I've been reading Matthew 13 over and over and over and over again, probably 10 times this month, because every time I read it, I get more and more out of it. And it's the parable of the sower, all the different parables. And I just think that, a good way to prepare for the end of the world is just study God's word, especially the parables. And so my last phase is this, just so you understand what I'm trying to say here, is that assuming that there's parallel timelines between nature and the Bible's twilight. We have 6,000 years and a little tiny bit at the end there, and we got 12 hours, a little bit of tiny end, and those ratios are the same, which is really interesting to me as an engineer. Is I don't think that's an accident. I think this is telling us when the sky's red, you guys start, get ready. Don't postpone it any longer, And the parallel exists. Christ drew our attention to the sky, and it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, and I will show thee wonders above. And I think that wonder in heaven, I don't know about you, but there's nothing I love more than watching a sunset. It's just so big and so magnificent that, it draws my attention to God every time I see it. And I even stop my car as I'm driving down the road, and I gotta catch this one, And my phone is full of, screenshots of the sky because I like this subject so much. But at some point, Christ is coming back. And when he does, there won't be anything that you want to stay here for when that happens. It's all going to be ruined. And, people think, well, I don't want to give up. Forget about what you give up. It's what you get that matters. We're going to go away from here and go someplace else. By the way, I was in my preparation for my speech about spiritualism. There's a phenomena in spiritualism that's kind of in this subject. The spiritualists are the basis for all pagan religions. And pagan religions historically don't have a salvation aspect to them. You bring offerings to the gods, and you pray to this idol and stuff like that, and that's to get blessings in this world. I sit next to a Hindu individual at work, and we talk and stuff. And I said, when you sin, who do you pray to? And he goes, oh, well, we don't pray for sin. We just pray for blessings, And it's a very deceiving thing. People that are into paganism, they don't have this hope we talked about in our Sabbath school today, this blessed hope of the life after this one. These people, when this all starts happening, they're going to pray to their hopeless idols, and it won't do anything for them. And they're deluded. So our big job is to try to help them understand that that's a worthless effort, and the only thing that matters is to give your heart to the Lord and look forward to the second coming of Christ. I didn't realize that all these pagan religions they have reincarnation and a few things like that. but that's all here, and and within the Christian denominations, there's I think messed up versions of the afterlife, but we just stick with what the Bible says, and we don't go after the things that are very popular right now about the afterlife. But the blessed hope is there's something better to look forward to, and this is what a lot of the pagan people at Jesus' time, they just flocked to him because they had never heard of this before. This was so different than everything they had ever heard. They want to go to heaven. They want to live in the new earth. There's no sin and no suffering, and all they have to do is give their heart to the Lord and follow him, and they can go. And it's a wonderful message, and it's shocking how many people don't understand that. There's so many different messed up, curving theologies out there that people just get, well, I'll just do whatever the pastor says. You should do what the Bible says. And the Bible is the only truth, the words of Jesus Christ. And so, when we talk next time about the spiritualism, I have two parts to that. One is how spiritualism has corrupted religion. I call that corporate. And so there's an aspect of spiritualism that has corrupted the churches and the religions of the world. And then in the second half of my lecture will be about how does spiritualism corrupted individuals? How does it affected people? And how, the most important point will be just to know who's behind it all. It's Lucifer and his angels. There isn't any other God. There's only one God, and some of them are bad, some of them are good, and they got the same powers. So we have to unmask the devil so that he doesn't steal our souls and our loved ones' souls. So the bottom line is, this animation I did, I sped it up with my cell phone. It's not the best, but it really makes a point. When that red flash happens, are you ready?